Today, as we celebrate 100 years of white women's suffrage in Victoria, I'd like to start with a quote which is a favourite of mine, by US writer, poet and lesbian, and yes, she was one of the hairy leg variety, Adrienne Rich. I often use this quote when I'm talking about women who've been trafficked or done prostitution. I use this quote when I talk about lesbians and gay men. Today I'd like to use this quote to talk about feminism and feminists. Adrienne Rich had this to say: "When those who have the power to name and to socially construct reality choose not to see you or hear you, when someone with the authority of a teacher, say, describes the world and you're not in it, there's a moment of psychic disequilibrium, imbalance, as if you looked in the mirror and saw nothing. It takes some strength of soul, and not just individual strength, but collective understanding, to resist this void, this non-being into which you're thrust, and to stand up, demanding to be seen and heard. We all know what it's like to hear the world described as if feminism and feminists aren't in it. Google the words, 'Is feminism dead?' and you get 2.5 million results. We know what Rich means when she says, it takes some strength of soul and not just individual strength, as Monica said, but collective understanding to resist this void. But we live in a time, I suspect, where we don't always feel confident in our collective understanding, where we doubt our capacity to stand together to resist being erased. We're scared not just that the world is being described as if feminism doesn't exist, but that maybe it doesn't. That maybe the void we see when we look in the mirror is true, and feminism is withering and dying. I'm going to talk in a minute about why I think feminism is in safe hands, but just in case my arguments later don't convince you, let me add now, by way of reassurance, that if you Google, "Is capitalism dead?" you get 4.5 million hits, so I don't think we should be too worried, although things have been looking a little bit shaky. If we're half as hardy as capitalists, I think we're pretty safe. It's partly in that context then of this worry about feminism that I imagine the Victorian Women's Trust has chosen keeping the faith as its theme for today. It reads a little bit to me like a call to arms, a call to the faithful, to the true believers. It's also a reminder to us of the women who went before us. It's a familiar theme in feminism, even before, as the quote I'm about to use shows, even before feminism was a commonly used word. I don't know when this statement I'm about to read was made, but it's from a woman called Abigail Scott Dunlin, who lived between 1834 and 1915, and who was a US suffrage organiser. She said, "The young women of today, free to study, to write, to choose their occupation, should remember that every inch of this freedom was bought for them at a great price. It is for them to show their gratitude by helping onward the reforms of their own times, by spreading the light of freedom and of truth still wider. The debt that each generation owes to the past, it must pay to the future." Reminds me of any number of modern feminists, probably over the last 20 years at least, calling on younger women to do the right thing, to repay their debt, to keep the faith. The work of our foremothers is in jeopardy, they suggest. We need to act. Young women need to honour and protect the work of those before them. They need to repay their debt to them. They mustn't shirk their obligation. Feminism, the message seems to be, needs women. I'm here to argue that young or old, I don't think we need to keep the faith. I'm here to argue that feminism doesn't need us. I'm here to say unequivocally that we need feminism. They are, I'd argue, very different things. In doing this, I'd like to explore two areas. For the first, I'm going to read a draft statement. As some of you may know, on the 28th of August this year, in a landmark decision, the High Court found that a Fitzroy brothel owner, Wei Tang, was guilty of 5 counts of using and 5 counts of possessing a slave. This is the first such conviction in Australia. On the 14th of November, Project Respect, a women's organisation I'm involved with, ran a seminar for 9 Thai and Chinese women who had been trafficked to Australia for prostitution. Wei Zhao, a fabulous young woman and feminist from the Fitzroy Legal Service, sat down with the women and with an interpreter outlined for them the key findings of the High Court judgment. The next day, Project Respect had a weekend away for women in the sex industry, where the women who'd attended the seminar the previous day developed a shared statement. The version I'm about to read is a draft. We're still checking it with the women, but it's got their broad okay for it. And I say that partly because I didn't ask Sarah, but if there are any journalists in the room, it's not finished and not to be quoted. But I didn't want to miss the opportunity when we're celebrating suffrage to share these voices. This is what those women said. We make this statement in response to the 28th of August 2008 High Court decision on the Queen versus Tang. We had the same experience as the women in the Wei Tang case. What happened to us was a nightmare. We can never forget. It comes back to us in dreams. It will affect us till we die. It has changed us. We were treated very badly. We worked from 11 a.m. to 3 or 4 a.m. We slept only 3 or 4 hours a night. Sometimes, some of us worked 24 hours. For 4 or 5 months, all we did was prostitution. Even when we had our period, we had to work. Sometimes we worked until we couldn't walk. We had to work until we were very, very sick and the customers refused to take us. Only then were we allowed to rest for one day. Some owners were not so cruel, but even when they were friendly, they still treated us as slaves. We were made to feel like animals. Customers were violent. Some of the customers were crazy. They treated us like animals. We were sexually abused. We were dragged. We were hit. Some of us were given drugs so we could work all the time. Some of the women we know have become drug addicts and now they have to keep doing prostitution to pay for drugs. It was like we were in jail. We had no free time. We couldn't go anywhere. We never had freedom. The traffickers treated us as slaves. We didn't have anywhere to go. It felt like we had survived and died at the same time. We had to keep doing what the traffickers said, for ourselves and for the people we loved. The traffickers threatened us. We were scared they would hurt us and our families. Some of us thought we would be killed. We blamed ourselves for what happened because we wanted to come to Australia. This changed our lives. Later on, the statement reads, "Before this High Court decision, we felt the public didn't know what happened to women like us and that they would judge us, and we felt that people like us didn't deserve anything better. But just because we've been prostitutes doesn't mean that we're not good people. We had no choice. We did this to survive. Even if women choose to do prostitution, they shouldn't be treated this way." When we were told about the High Court decision, we felt glad. We felt relieved. We felt released. Now we have walked out of the darkness. We can again have a good life, like we did before we came to Australia. We can start a new life now. We feel now that people believe that we are real and understand what we've been through. We feel that the High Court justices respect and understand us. Because of what happened to us, we didn't trust people. Now it seems there are good people in the world. People outside have believed what happened to us. We feel more valuable. If women can be bought and sold in Melbourne, if women can be treated so badly that the law, who finds it so hard to recognise violence against women, can say they were slaves, then I think we need feminism.